many times, guys and girls, have you heard it's what's on the inside that counts? It doesn't matter if he or she is beautiful or not. Well, whether you think that's true or not, in bowling, what's on the inside of the bowling ball and what's on the outside of the bowling ball, it matters. So in today's video, we will be learning about the bowling ball dynamics and how you can get better going forward. So let's get into it. Alright, welcome back to the channel, guys. In today's video, we're learning about the cores and the cover stocks and different things about the bowling ball dynamics and how you can get better at choosing which bowling ball to use, no matter what condition it is, what kind of lane surface, what kind of oil pattern, whatever the situation is, you can know about what tool to use because that's what we know. Every single bowling ball you have is just a tool. So like in construction, you'll have your hammer, screwdriver, whatever you're using on that construction site. Well, in bowling, it's the same thing. We all have tools. And so you have your stronger balls, you have your medium balls, and you have your weaker ones, and then you have your ones for your spares. So they're all tools, but you have to know which one to use. And so by knowing more about RG and differentials and different cover stocks and cores, then that can help you better decide which bowling ball to use. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. We're going to be talking about the cores and covers here. All right, so first point, bowling ball covers and cores are what determines the bowling ball's performance. So that's what I was talking about. So whatever core is inside the bowling ball or whatever cover stock is on the outside of the bowling ball will determine what that bowling ball can do. It will determine how strong it is or how weak it is. All right, next point. The cover stock is the outside of the bowling ball. The core is the inside of the bowling ball, which is what I was just talking about. And then the next point is the cover has direct contact with the lane surface and will determine how much traction the ball has. So that's what I was talking about with the cover stock. Cover stock will determine how much grip that ball has. So if it's a more of a dull cover stock, then it will gain traction a much earlier. It will read the lane a lot earlier, so it will get into the roll a lot sooner. If it has a shinier cover, it will just skid through the oil until it finally sees friction, and then it'll finally start to read the lane and then roll forward. So depending on what your cover stock is will depend on how much traction the ball has. Right, last point, the core will determine how strong or weak the ball is. So the core is what is inside the ball. So depending on if you have a asymmetric bowling ball or a symmetric bowling ball will depend on how strong that bowling ball is. So in reactive bowling balls, you always have a core. And normally with the asymmetric bowling balls, which is the core, it will be stronger down lane and will get into a flip inside the bowling ball, and then that will make the bowling ball hook more down lane. Whereas a symmetric bowling ball, it normally is weaker because it doesn't want to flip and get into its roll, if that makes any sense. And we'll get into that more later on. The types of cover stocks include, and I will go over each one so that way if you are a beginner, you know more about what each bowling ball does and what it's meant for. So the first one is plastic, or a lot of the spare balls today, it's a polyester cover. So plastic and polyester, they're basically just used for spares, and it's the straightest bowling ball a person can have. So in the terms of a reactive ball, it is the weakest ball a person can have. So it's not going to move hardly at all. In order to get a plastic ball to move, you have to put a lot of revs on it, and then you also have to have a lot of friction on that lane surface. So if for some reason the oil has depleted and it's gone away from that lane surface, then you will start to see some motion out of a plastic or a polyester ball. But like I say, it's normally just used for spares, and that's it. You don't really need to be using it for strikes. Now, urethane is used a lot today. It's been used for a long period of time, and I feel like in today's game, and it has been for at least, I don't know, at least 10 years, maybe 15 years, it's been used a lot on tour, especially for two-handers. And it just gives you more control. It reads the lane a lot earlier than what a normal reactive ball would. And so you have a lot more control because you see it sooner, you see the lane sooner, and you can see about what the motion is going to do on any type of pattern. Unless it's high volume and it's a long pattern. A lot of times, if it's a medium pattern with medium volume, or sometimes even high volume, and then lower than that, you can always get a good read by using your urethane bowling ball and see just to see how much motion there is on that pattern or on that lane surface. So it kind of gives you a good gauge. Reactive resin, um, it's something you have to have it in your arsenal. Um, it's something that will give you more reaction down lane. It won't read the lane as soon as a urethane ball will, but it gives you more power, more hook down lane, which will create more of a margin for error, which is the reason why this technology has totally changed the game throughout the years. When you go from rubber to urethane to reactive resin, it's like it's daylight and dark throughout each stage of history. So reactive resin has totally changed the game throughout the years, and you have to have it in your arsenal. And like I say, this basically reactive resin will read the lane through the mid lane and give you more power down lane, which will create more margin for error. And then solids, hybrids, and pearls are the different types of covers or the different types of balls that reactive resin has. So a solid will be more controllable typically. A hybrid is the best of both worlds between a pearl and a solid. And then, so that's right in the middle between a solid and a pearl is the hybrid. And then the pearl is the shinier cover stock, which will be, it will read the lane a lot later. So it'll just skid through kind of like a plastic ball will, and then read the lane a lot later. And then typically will have more shape down lane as it sees the friction and it comes around the corner. So now we'll be talking about the RGs and the differential. So in case you don't know what RG is or what differential is, I will talk about that in detail right now. And this one right here, we'll be talking about the RG. So the RG and the differential are two numbers that will tell you what type of bowling ball you're using. So the RG is the radius of gyration. And it will tell you how early your ball will get into a roll. RG is basically the measure of how a ball's mass is distributed, indicating how quickly it will spin or start hooking. So if you think about it like this, the way I think about RG is the way that the weight of something is distributed in order to level out something. So if you think about like a plane when it lands, it's tilted up, but also when it takes off, it will tilt up. But why is that? Reason why that is because if my hand was a plane, then more of the weight will be here. But why is that? It's the engines are here, and so that's more of the weight. And so the front here is where the pilot is. And so in order for that plane to take off, the more weight has to be back here. That way it tilts up and it goes up. And it's the same thing when it lands. More of the weight has to be back here, so that way it can slow itself down. And as it lands, we've all seen how a plane lands. It lands back first, and then it tilts down, so that way it can land smoothly on the surface. Because if there was more weight here, then it would just dive right in. Or if there's a whole bunch of weight back here, then it would just go straight up. And so you have to have the perfect amount of weight here in order for it to take off and then land, if that makes any sense. All right, so like I said, it will tell you how early your ball will get into a roll. Low RG will hook early. High RG will hook much later. Low RG is core heavy. High RG is cover heavy. So if you're a beginner and you're thinking, well, low RG, it hooks early, and high RG, it hooks much later. But what does that mean? Well, hook early just basically means you're going to see hook earlier. So you'll see the ball read the lane and then get into a roll down lane, but you'll see it much sooner because it's seeing the lanes sooner. It's catching that friction sooner. Whereas a high RG will hook much later. So if you think about it like this, the low RG will see the lane sooner. The high RG will kind of get farther down before you start to see it make its turn. And so low RG is core heavy, high RG is cover heavy. So basically all that means is the core, if it's a low RG ball, the core of that bowling ball will weigh more than what the cover does. And then if it's a high RG, it's cover heavy. So the cover will be a lot heavier than what the core is. So that will determine, again, what the ball's performance is. All right, next one we will talk about the differential. So what is differential? Differential will tell you how much hook your ball will have. A high differential will produce high flare. A low differential will produce low flare. So if you don't know what flare is basically how many times that you'll see these rings. Like you'll see oil rings on your bowling ball. And if it's a high flaring ball, then you'll see a lot more rings. So it's a lot more rotation all over the bowling ball. Whereas if it's a low flare, you'll see the rings kind of roll over top of each other, and they'll be kind of it'll be really tight ring. Whereas a high flare, it will be spread out a lot farther, and you'll see a lot more rings because it's rotating on different parts of that bowling ball. So it will tell you how much hook your ball will have. If you know, just like with the RG, with a high flaring ball, that's typically your strongest ball. With a low flaring ball, it's typically your lowest, like your weakest ball, if that makes any sense. And so in order to determine what's high differential or low differential, you got to know your numbers. So a high differential will be greater than 0.46. And that's 0.046. And that's early hook, beneficial on fresh and high volume oil patterns, and that will produce high flare. Whereas low differential is lower than 0.025, and it goes longer down lane than used on the higher friction surfaces. And if you have any questions, or if you got confused, just rewind the video and go back, and that way you can understand it better. All right, so in this part here, I will explain the numbers. So that way, when you go to your bowling balls page, so if you use Storm or you use Motive or whatever brand you use, Columbia 300, doesn't really matter, Radical, you'll have on bowlingball.com or whatever website it is, you'll have the bowling ball dynamics and all the specifications or the specifications on what that bowling ball is. So you'll have all these different numbers. You'll have RG, you'll have your differential, you'll have your cover stock, your core, and all the different numbers listed with that. And so you have to understand it better to understand what it means and what kind of bowling ball that you need. So what's a low RG ball? It is 2.46 to 2.51. Medium 2.52 to 2.56. High RG is 2.57 to 2.80. And typically your benchmark ball will be a low RG ball and then a medium differential ball. And what that means is basically it wants you want your benchmark ball to read the lane sooner, and then it wants to be a medium flaring ball. And so that way you have a more of a controlled motion, which is what you want to see out of a benchmark bowling ball. So that way it's not too inconsistent if you get the rotation wrong. It's something that is more of a predictable motion on about any type of a pattern. That's typically what you'll see. So a low differential is 0.025 or lower. A medium differential is 0.026, and between 0.045 and high differential 0.046 to 0.060. So if you want to take a picture of that, you can. I'll zoom in on that. But that's basically the numbers that you need to know in order to understand what bowling ball to use or what type of bowling ball that is. All right, so I use Motive, and it's easier for me to just look at the ball guide, and that will tell me exactly what type of bowling ball that I need to use. So you can build your arsenal just like this is the current ball guide right now. Now it changes depending on what time of the year it is, because they always have new bowling balls coming out, and so they will change it depending on what the current selection is. So, but it's so easy to understand because this is smooth motion, this is angular motion. So the farther left it is, the smoother the ball is. The farther right it is, the more angular down lane that it will be. And then you have your high friction and low friction. So right here, the more red it is, that's the more high friction. The more blue it is, that's the more low friction the oil is. So it's very, very simple. So let's say that you wanted something very angular and it was for heavy oil. Well, there you go. Something like the Jackal and this one right here. These two different Jackals here. Now, you wouldn't want the Jackal Onyx because it's more of an angular, it's more of a smooth motion because you want something more angular. So it'd be either these two Jackals here. Or let's say you want something weaker and a lot smoother. Well, you can do the Tank, or you can do whatever this is here, the Ascend, or you can do something maybe a little bit stronger, one of these Venoms here. So it's very simple. I'm full disclaimer, I am not sponsored by Motive. It's just I like the company, but I also use Hammer, different Brunswick products. So it doesn't really matter to me, but I like Motive because it's made in the USA. And that's what I like about the company. They seem like that they are a strong U.S. company, which is what I stand for. So, anyways, it's very simple. You can take a picture of that or look it up online. That way that you can have that in case you want to use Motive. I know Storm, they have their own version on their website, I think, and you can compare bowling balls. But in the next couple of slides, I'm going to do a bowling ball comparison, so that way that you can understand what the differences are between the bowling balls and how you can understand the numbers better. All right, so in the first bowling ball comparison, we're going to be talking about the Max Thrill, which is super, super weak, and the Jackal Onyx, which is super strong. So it's total opposites, and you'll see that clear as day. But you'll have to know this whenever you're picking your bowling balls for your arsenal. So just by looking at the numbers, look at this right here. So this is the RG 2.54, differential is 0.036. Now what's the Jackal Onyx? Look at this, totally different. 2.48 and 0.47. And why is that? The Jackal is so much stronger than what the Max Thrill is. Why? Because it's a pearl, it's a weaker bowling ball, and it's for a higher friction surface. And your ball guide will tell you that because it's in the total bottom right corner, which I just showed you, and I can go back to that. Max Thrill is down here. You see that? Look at that. It's high friction and it's very, very angular, whereas the Jackal Onyx is very smooth, but it's for heavy oil, so very, very low friction surfaces. So totally just daylight and dark. So if we can go back to the Max Thrill, you see the cover stock. Cover stock is a Term Oil XP3 Pearl, and the core is the halogen core. But what's the Jackal Onyx? Look at this. Leverage HXC solid, and that's a Predator V2 asymmetric. So this has an asymmetric core, which will be what? A lot stronger down lane, but it's also smooth. But why is that? It's because it has this cover stock. And so depending on, like always, you have to look at the surface, which is 1000 grit, the differential, the RG, cover stock core, and then because of all of these things here will determine what the scale is on the length, the back end, the hook, and the flare. So this ball is flaring at over 7 inches, which is totally different than what the Max Thrill is. This ball is flaring at 4. Totally different daylight and dark, but two tools you gotta have in your arsenal because you may need this for your league, you may need it for a short pattern, you may need it for a medium pattern, you just don't know. This depends on the volume of oil and the lane surface and what type of oil that they're using. So I just wanted to go over those numbers just to kind of compare of what the different bowling balls are and how the numbers differ. Now I'm going to do one more comparison here. All right, so this is the second comparison. This is the Venom Shock, and this is the Hyper Venom right here, which is two similar bowling balls, which is totally different than what the first bowling ball comparison was. And the reason why I'm wanting to do this is because when you have two balls that are very similar, you gotta know which one that you need, or if you need both. And I can go ahead and tell you right now, there's a total difference between the Venom Shock and the Hyper Venom because it all has to do with the cover stock and the type of finish it has. So that will determine what kind of bowling ball you have. And I have these two, and they are totally different. The Hyper Venom will be a lot smoother through the front, and it's also a lot weaker on the back end, whereas the Venom Shock, it'll read the lane a lot sooner, but be a little bit more stronger on the back end. So it's two tools that you would have to have in your bag in order to do good on a lot of different patterns, really. So I just want to go over a couple of numbers here. The RG is 2.48 and the differential is 0.031. But what's the Hyper Venom? Again, the exact same. So you're thinking, well, this is the exact same ball, right? Absolutely not. Cover stock here for the Hyper Venom is the Propulsion MXR Pearl, and the core is the gear symmetric. But what's the Venom Shock? Same core, gear symmetric, but different cover. Term Oil MFS solid. And so you have to see that. You have to know what is the difference, and should I get this bowling ball or not. The finish on the Venom Shock is a 4000 grit, whereas on the Hyper Venom it's a 5500 grit. So Venom Shock 4000 grit, Hyper Venom a 5500 grit. So that tells you those are the two key differences. It's the cover stock and the finish. And that changes everything because how that cover stock is reading the lane will determine what kind of bowling ball it is. And then the finish will determine how much grip it has on that lane. And you can always change it. Like, say, if you wanted the hypervenom to act more like the venom shock, you could sand it down, and that would change it enough to get you a little different motion down lane, but it's still going to be different because of what the cover stock is. Just to recap, what you have to know is that the RG and the differential are very important to your bowling ball, and you have to know the numbers and what they mean, what they stand for, so that way you know what tool to use and what type of bowling ball to use on any type of situation, any type of surface, any type of pattern. So that way that you know, oh, if it's dry, oh, I need to do this. If there's heavy oil, a high volume oil pattern, well, then I need to use this ball. And it's all determined on the RG, the differential, the cover stock, and the core. So you have to know these numbers and know what they mean. I hope you learned something today. And if you like the video, go ahead and hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you in the next video where we will cover more of the basics of bowling and how you can get better in your bowling game at home. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.